Great. Elaine Bliss from PestFix, our sponsors today. Are you there, Elaine? There you
Yes,
are.
I am.
Fabulous. How are you doing? Have you got a coffee ready and all your technology's working okay? I got your Pepsi Max. There you go.
No, I
Yeah.
don't do coffee. I'll tell you what, just to get the audio out of the way, just get that little chink noise there. Yeah, my tech has been playing up again today, so hopefully I'm loud enough so even if the mic is a bit sketchy, you'll still be able to hear me.
You know what? You
Um,
sound perfect. It sounds great, actually. Really clear.
Something's
Really
got to be
clear.
perfect. And yeah, as we were having a few issues this morning, hopefully everything will go smoothly.
Yeah.
But we'll
Yeah,
see.
indeed. I'm sure I'll try and help her I can if we do have anything, but it all sounds and looks wonderful at the moment. But you're talking a foul discussion from an unusual bird.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, great. Well, listen, if you want to start sharing your screen and tell us yeah, what that is, that does sound pretty
hopefully I am doing that now.
great. It's there we go. Fabulous. It's all working. I'll leave you to it, Elaine, and yeah,
Let's
I'll
just
see you in
see,
a
is
bit.
it, hey, can you all see what's the next slide, i.e. what's an unusual bird?
We can see that, yeah.
Fantastic, because that was my big thing. You could all see the first slide and it wasn't going any further. So what's an unusual bird? For years, I've been dragging myself around PestFix or around these forums talking about seagulls and pigeons. They're our big one. For most of you, it's pigeons. Obviously, coastally and in the summer, it's seagulls. But for this instance, we're talking about really unusual birds. Well, they're not that unusual, actually. We're not talking about electus parrots or women with purple hair. That's my normal colouring. We're going to be looking today at the Canada goose or the Branta canadensis. And I always get my knickers in a twist coming out with the scientific name. So earlier on, I called it something completely different. It was a Brabantia, which is the bin I've got in my kitchen. So we're looking at Canada geese today. Now, they tend to be more of a rural pest than an urban. But again, as Richard was saying, sometimes you're going to find them in city centres where you've got big parks. If you've got a big park with a lake or something like that, you might end up coming up against the Canada geese. So why are they a problem? So they poo. Like all birds, we always have to start with they poo. All pests, really. Let's start with the drop-ins. Potentially they're a slip hazard. We had one customer, and it was one of the colleges in Cambridge, and they had the Canada geese coming up on the lawns and fouling all over them, and it was getting a slip hazard for the undergrads to a point of there were so many of them in the summer. During the May ball season, one poor girl ended up slipping on it and falling in the River Cam itself. Now there may have been alcohol involved, but it was definitely the geese drop-ins that got the blame. So the next year they were determined to get the geese under control. Drop-ins, they carry pathogens. I mean, really, do we need to go into more detail than that? Anything that's defecating, fouling, pooing, whichever terminology you want to use, that is going to be carrying pathogens. There's potential for disease. Obviously, the fouling is unattractive, doesn't look good when it's all over your footpaths and your lawns and so forth. And one thing that not a lot of people might have come across, and where PestFix personally got involved with quite a lot of geese, and it was a combination of Canada geese and Egyptian geese, is they will foul on solar panels, which will cause damage to the panels and loss of income. Now, I've got solar panels on my roof. Unfortunately, I don't have Canada geese on them. But this was a big floating solar panel array on a reservoir just to the west of London. And when we were going there during the day and we're trialing it, we're like, well, we can see it's covered in pit, but we couldn't actually see what it was. About 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening, as dusk fell, about 5,000 birds came west out of London to come and night roost. Now, the company that was responsible for that, they were spending £20,000 a week cleaning the panels. So £20,000 a week, that's a hell of a lot of money. And that's without taking into consideration the loss of revenue from those panels itself. I actually don't pay an electricity bill because of the money that I generate on my solar panels. Yay! But you know, they should have been generating hundreds of thousands of pounds, but a large portion of the time, the panels themselves were covered in fouling, and that does the acidity in it damages the panels themselves, so they then, you know, they didn't last as long. Canada geese, aggressive behavior. I mean, I used to know when I was a little girl, we had some friends that had a small holding and they had a dog, and there had been complaints because the dog was aggressive. And when the dog just got old and didn't want to get out from his bed anymore, our friend got a flock of geese. They were just regular geese, not Canada geese, and they actually were a better security device than the dog itself. Absolutely terrified. I wouldn't get out of the car when we went to visit anymore. They can be really aggressive. And again, if you're in a park or near the River Cam or anywhere where you've got a lot of them around, lots of people, they think, oh, well, we might feed them or something. The geese get used to being fed. They then come up in large numbers and, they're bigger than most children. So they can be very aggressive, very, very intimidating. Going back to our sort of more rural pest control, they eat lots of plants, they eat lots of crops, and that's going to lead to overgrazing, denuding of foliage, and just generally trampling it down. They're big birds, so when they walk across something that's at its young, tender stage of growth, they are going to trample it, and that plant might not recover. And then significantly, if we look at sort of more health and safety or air safety, airstrike. Because of the size of them, they can cause significant damage. Now, where we were dealing with this reservoir back in about 8 years ago, it was on the flight path to Heathrow. Now, because of where it was, we didn't have to deal with it too much when it came to our solution on how to control that. But there was a real risk if these birds went up at the same time or came down at the same time as a plane coming in and out. And let's face it, I think they're every 30 seconds out of Heathrow. That's a significant risk for airstrike. And the way those engines work, they can easily suck a bird out of its flight path, and that's going to cause significant damage. Fortunately, planes tend to have 1 or 2 spare engines, but, it's not something we really want to be relying on. So how do we control them? Well, first of all, let's look at the law. Like everything, they're a bird. They're protected under the Wildlife and Countryside Act. Excuse me. So Wildlife and Countryside Act, for any of you that don't deal with birds very often, all birds are protected, including their nests and eggs. I actually heard something on the news this morning. Somebody was being prosecuted for owning part of a bird. Don't know quite what they'd been doing, but it was on our local news this morning. Somebody was prosecuted for owning part of a bird, and it was this act they were prosecuted under. Okay. If you commit an offence under the Wildlife and Countryside Act, penalties include fines and prison. It depends on which offence you commit and how many of them you commit, and obviously the judge and whether or not there's any room in the prison. But there are some pretty hefty fines, and there are the potential for prison sentences. So this is not an act we want to mess with. And one of the things that's very easy to consider, especially when you're in the countryside, is you go, I'll get away with it. Nobody will see, nobody will know. Now, in this country has more cameras per head of capita than anywhere else in the world. So we're talking the state-owned CCTV cameras, privately owned ones, so every supermarket or wherever. Ring doorbells. How many of you have got a GoPro on your bike? How many of you have got motorcycles that have got cameras on your helmets? But also, my neighbours have just put a trail cam in their front garden because we've got a hedgehog. Lovely. Let's all watch footage of the hedgehog. It's really sweet to watch. But these cameras are coming down so much in price. These cameras are everywhere. So as you might think, you're in the middle of nowhere, nobody's going to see you. They may well very, very well be a camera attached to a tree that's filming you beautifully. And obviously that camera footage can be used as evidence against you. So just beware, anything you're doing, you are being watched, you are being filmed. Okay, just think of that wherever you're doing, really. So like everything, when it comes to the law, there's always exceptions. And when it comes to dealing with Canada geese, we've got 3 potential licenses. So one is GL41, so the general license to kill or take certain species of birds to preserve public health or public safety. All we're allowed to use here is when there are problems with nesting birds. And let's face it, if they're nesting, they're doing all the other things. So this is if there is an issue with public health or public safety. GL42. This is a general license to kill or take certain species of wild birds to prevent serious damage. Now, this is serious damage to crops, fruit and vegetables, inland waterways and fisheries. Okay, so if we're looking at farm territory or riverbanks where they're damaging the ground there, then we can be dealing with that. Okay. And then we've got CL12, which is a class license for air safety. Now, this one must be registered with Natural England. So if we go through those licenses one on one, well, I say one by one, GL41 and GL42 are very, very similar in the way they apply. So first of all, you don't need to apply for a license. You can go online and download a copy of it. It's not a legal requirement, but it's a very sensible requirement, because if you haven't read it and if you've not got a copy of it, how do you know you're actually sticking to the terms of that license? What you do need to do is you do need to record your actions. Now, these licenses give you the right to use lethal control. And there's a number of different methods you can use, from nest and egg destruction, nest and egg removal, shooting, dispatch by hand, lots of methods we can use. But you do need to record what you've done and why you've done it. And you need to keep those records for at least 3 years, and that's from the date that you carried out the lethal control. If you're not sure, there's always the thing, oh yeah, I can do this, I'm fine. We can all get caught up with these little foibles of, well, I thought I was all right, but I wasn't. So the Birdwise team on the BPCA, Natalie and me are part of that, but put together a document. It's a checklist of everything you should check before you carry out lethal control. So it's, have you considered other options? What other options did you consider? Why did you discount them? Now, it tickles me because I do get some people and they say, oh, I'm buying some plastic owls. And I'm like, why? They don't work. And like, well, the thing is, I've got to do something before I can go and shoot them. Actually, you haven't. You can say, I considered using plastic owls. They won't work. I considered using a hawk. It's not going to work in this circumstance. But this means you've actually documented that you have taken into consideration these other things, rather than, you know, trying to scrabble for it when you're in a police interview. If you're looking at CL12, this is the class license for air safety. Okay, this one you do need to apply for in advance. Once you've carried out any lethal control, you do also need to report back to DEFRA of what lethal control you've done and where you've done it. Now, on all of these licenses, it tells you that an authorized person can do this, and you have to ask, well, who is an authorized person? It's the landowner, the occupier, or somebody employed by them. The good thing with the CL12 is, as well as taking lethal control on the aerodrome itself, you are also allowed to take out lethal control on Canada geese up to 13 kilometres from the perimeter of the aerodrome. Happy days. But obviously, 13 kilometres from the perimeter of the aerodrome isn't necessarily owned by the aerodrome itself. So that's where you might have to work with local landowners to get their authorization to be on the land to carry out that control. So if everyone was saying, I legally killed the bird, then you get done for trespassing. So do be careful, if you are off the site of the aerodrome, that you are still within the law. So let's have a look at the geese themselves. Canada goose, as I say, Branta canadensis. Look at the biology and behavior of them. So to identify them, they are large birds. Okay, there's no messing. They can stand up to 1 meter tall. Now, I'm only 1.5 meters at the best of times, but when I was a little girl, I was probably, 3 foot nothing. So these geese that my dad's friend employed as security were taller than me. It was terrifying. Very distinctive brownish colouring with a black neck and a white chin strap or stripe. It always looks to me like a little scarf on under their neck. Or maybe back to the COVID days, they're just about to pull their face covering up. Okay. They nest on large islets in lakes or something, or sometimes in marsh hummocks. And also on floating solar panel arrays, which is where it's sort of not so much a commercial, a public health pest, more of a commercial pest, because they were having a massive impact on revenue. Now, whilst they're Canada geese, and we all think of, oh, they fly over, I always thought they flew over every year from Canada. The things I thought before I joined this industry, I was an idiot. But they were imported over years ago. They don't migrate huge distances. It tends to be only a short distance between their summer breeding and their wintering sites. So it's not as if they're going to disappear and go to Canada for the summer or the winter. No, that flight is done for them. Okay. And as I've said, they will protect their nest and their brood aggressively. You are not going to, this is one of these things when we're looking at nest and egg removal or something like that. Good luck. You're going to need a lot of PPE, and I mean body armor. So feeding and breeding, they're herbivorous. As large birds, they eat plant life, and they're big birds. They eat a lot of it. Okay, we're not just talking about, oh, I ate 3 grains of rice today. They're going to eat a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruit, a lot of crops. They form lifelong pair bonds, so they're one of the romantic species. And they also have this very strong attachment to the natal area, i.e. the area they were born. So if you start with one pair, give it a couple of years, and the kids are going to be breeding there, and then the grandkids, and then the great-grandkids, and you end up with a massive flock of them. They lay 5 to 7 eggs at a time, and they tend to be laying those eggs at the end of March or in April. Again, our nesting seasons, our breeding seasons, everything is out of whack because of the weather. Okay, so sometimes we're seeing it with seagulls, sometimes they're later, sometimes they're earlier. It really all depends on the weather. But predominantly, we're looking at that egg laying at the end of March or beginning of April. The eggs take 4 weeks to incubate, and the young are flightless for about 10 weeks, so they're able to fledge late July. Now, the adults molt around the end of June. And this is, it renders them flightless. So basically, if they were going off for their migratory flight, their body gives them big, strong, fresh feathers for flight. And the only way it can do that is to chuck out all the old ones. So they lose quite a lot of feathers, and predominantly a lot of the ones they're losing are their wing feathers. And they shed them in quite a large number in a very short period of time. It's quite stressful for them, okay? You can tell they're molting because you're going to find lots of feathers. Doesn't just mean they've had a fight and they've been pulling feathers out of each other, but you're going to find lots of feathers, whether it be floating on the water, on the grassland that they're wandering around. But also, if you look at this picture up on the screen here, the previous images you'd have seen the wings go right down, dark wings, almost down to the very tail end of them. Whereas here you can see this white exposed rump. That's because their wing feathers, their flight feathers on the wings just aren't there. They've molted. So when you can see this exposed rear end, that's when you know they're flightless. Why does that matter? Well, obviously, if we are doing lethal control and we're going to take a shot, if you've got 50 birds and you take a shot, 49 of them are going to fly. So realistically, if you are going to be using lethal control and you're going to be shooting them, when they're going through their molt, that's a good time to do it. Now, you've got to be very, very careful because there is a very sweet spot. You need to make sure that if you are shooting, you are not leaving behind any chicks that can't fend for themselves, okay? So make sure that you're getting complete control there, or that the chicks are old enough to fend for themselves. Okay, so methods of control. I've already mentioned lethal control, but environmental management or fencing. Difficult to change the environment, but it is possible. So essentially, 3 things you can look at. If you're looking at a riverbank, if you can make that bank steeper, then the birds can't nest on it. And you go, it's a river, it's going to ebb, it's going to flow. But let's look at it more, actually, are we building a water feature? Are we digging a reservoir? Are we putting a pond there for drainage or something like that? Are we simply putting in an ornamental feature? If you are, you can make sure that the banks of whatever you're doing is as steep as possible. Because the steeper it is, the birds are less likely to be nesting on there. The other thing you can look at is if you have got some kind of slope, and we put slopes on our water features so that the frogs can get in and out, and the other insects and animals can get in and out. It's, give with one, take with the other. So what you can do there is make sure that the planting is really dense, because if the planting is really dense and quite rigid, then it's going to be very difficult for the birds to nest. If you've got loads of really steep reeds, they can't get in there. And there is also the concept of fencing. Now, funny thing, they prefer to walk from their bedroom or their nesting site to their feeding site. So actually a small fence between the two can stop them moving around. Notice can. Now this fence could be as short as 30 centimetres. Generally, some people go up to about a metre or so forth. But they do have wings. They can fly. So I've seen people put fencing up, and sometimes it works, especially when they're molting. Yeah, they can't get over it. But essentially, if they really want to get from their nesting site to the food source, again, another client of mine, blocks of luxury apartments on the back of and at the back of them there were some lawns going down to a river. Fantastic, beautiful views. And then some of the residents started feeding the birds, including the Canada geese. So the geese were coming up from the river, and anyone that was out there just having a sunbathe or walking their dog were getting attacked by these Canada geese that were looking for food. They put the fencing up, and as I say, during the molt it worked brilliantly. But as soon as their wing feathers grew back, they just flew over it. I had told them that it probably wouldn't work. Okay, but we've also got lethal control, scaring, bioacoustics, and lasers. So as I say, environmental management, I've just done all that. I've got ahead of myself on my slides. I do that a lot. Okay. So if we look at lethal control, traditional methods that we use if you're doing it for seagulls or anything else, you can use nest and egg destruction. You can oil the eggs. That's generally dipping it in the white paraffin, the BP paraffin, and you can prick them. Okay. Generally, if you are, or replacing them with ersatz eggs or something like that, if you're going for the oiling pricking, they're still going to protect those nests. If you're going for full nest and egg destruction, then there's a chance they're more likely to move on. They can get sick of rebuilding. But all the time they're actually sat on an egg, they are going to be protecting it aggressively. Okay. As I've said, you can shoot them. Best to do it at the end of June when the adults are unable to fly due to their molt. Make sure there are no unfledged chicks around. Make sure you stay within the law. As I say, go onto the BPCA website. I'm assuming everybody that's on here today is a member of the BPCA. If not, join. It's fantastic. And there's a website, a page on there, and it's a checklist. It's a document that shows evidence of compliance. Check that. Make sure you are within the bounds of the law. Okay. Other methods of control we can use bioacoustics. Okay. So there's lots of different bioacoustic brands on the market. Different products, different properties, different results, different price points. Okay. Generally, I would say if you've got Canada geese, then you want to be looking at the Scarecrow range. They're fantastic. Their call quality is amazing. Or the bird alerts. Bird alerts are really good because they're an intelligent system. One of the big complaints you get when you look at your bioacoustics is, oh, it's going off all the time. There's no birds around. The bird alert only triggers if it hears the sound of the target species. Okay, so you can program it to say, no, not fussed about seagulls, not fussed about starlings. We are worried about Canada geese. If you hear this call, that lovely honking noise they make, if you hear this call, you need to emit the distress call of a Canada goose. Interestingly, if you're dealing with Egyptian geese, just as a side note, they are predominantly a quiet bird. They're very quiet. So they do respond though to the distress call of the Canada goose. So if you've got Egyptian geese as well, then the Canada goose call will repel those as well. They speak the same language, but they're just a much quieter species. Okay, so these should all be considered. Also, if you are looking at any of these systems, obviously they tend to be in rural areas, so that's going to be away from electricity, and they can all be used on solar power. But I can't remember the last time we had solid sunshine. So do be aware they do come with the flip side of if they're running on solar power and we've not got, or we've got our typical British weather, they might not work effectively as they could. So try and get mains power to them wherever you possibly can. Another great method of control with Canada geese is the laser. It really is very effective at moving them on. Now the lasers as we use it, the solar panel array that I was talking about a minute ago, we've got 2 lasers and 3 bioacoustics. We've actually got the Scarecrows on there, and they have been working now very effectively for about 5 years. They've got the numbers right down. I won't say there's no geese on there at all, but you know, they're spending something like a couple of thousand a month to clean the panels rather than 20,000 a week. Okay. But when we look at our lasers, we've got the 2 kinds. We've got the handheld and we've got the autonomic. Now on the solar panel array, it's a controlled environment. There's a big 15-foot fence around it. Takes 2 guys from the water authority to go and let you in. So that's as controlled as can be. So we're all right with the autonomic there, and it's a fixed system. Works brilliantly. Most cases, you're probably going to be looking at using the handheld version. Now with our laser, it's a class 3B laser. It means it's got to be used by a trained person in a controlled environment. Now, obviously, if you're there behind the laser itself, you can control that environment. You can say, oh, there's a person, you can turn it off. With the autonomic version, you've got to make sure nobody else can get around. But when it comes to the laser, the birds perceive the beam as a big green stick and the dot that it makes on the ground as a solid object. So if you were standing there having a chat with your mates and you could see a big green stick panning towards you, you're going to move away from it. And likewise, if you saw a big thing moving across the ground towards you, you're going to move away from it. And of course, as one bird moves, they're flocking birds. And as it moves one, it encourages the rest to move on. Okay. Now, one thing I will say with the lasers is there's a couple of different strengths. When you buy the autonomic, it always comes by default at the 500 milliwatt strength. The handheld version, you've got a 500 milliwatt and just the handheld, which is 100 milliwatt. You will probably need the 500 milliwatt. Predominantly, you're going to be using it during daylight, so you need that brighter beam. Also, it's a green beam. They're probably going to be on a green surface, grass, crops, whatever. So it needs to be more visible. So go with that. And also, by going for that stronger laser, you can be at a further distance, so they're less likely to be attacking you. Just, plus points there. But remember, with Canada geese, like everything, think integrated bird management. You probably are going to need more than one tool to do the job. It may well be at times when there's a larger number coming in. If they're coming in for a night roost, then you can go there with your handheld laser, but you can keep the bird alert running there during the day as and when needed. And it may well be, if there's a very large number, that you're going to have to do a cull. If it's just one or two, you might not need to. Although, if they're attacking children, yeah, you've got a public safety issue there. Okay. If you're not sure, get some training. Okay. One of the things that we offer here at PestFix to all BPCA members, we have our BPCA members benefit scheme, and this gives you two key benefits. One is 6 days of free training every year. So for every company membership, you get at least 6 days of free training. Now, if you're a sole trader, that could be just you coming down 6 different events. Brilliant. You get so many CPD points. If you're a smaller company and you want to send 2 technicians to 3 courses, or 3 to 2 courses, or however you want to spread it out, that's entirely up to you. If you're looking at 6 people, I can come to you. I'm off to Oxford later on in the year. I'm doing 2 half-day courses, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. That way all of their techs get trained on the same thing, so everyone gets some exposure there. I've also got I've got some guys coming down from East Anglia next month, and I'm doing a bespoke bird course for them here. So get the most of it. If you're not sure, come and do it. I do 3 different bird courses already, and I'm sort of doing bespoke ones all the time as needed. Tell me what you want. If you want a bespoke course, tell me what you want. I'll write it. And anything you do here, we try and do as much hands-on training. I've had to blur out my background because there's just so much timber and fixings and all that behind me. It's crazy. Okay. But in addition to the training, we do also give you some special pricing. Now, I need to update that slide because we've at least doubled the quantity of products, but you get essentially at least 8% off of the normal trade price. As a pest controller, you automatically get trade pricing. We only have one level of trade pricing, and then we have this secondary discount on key products for BPCA members. Okay, so that's well worth knowing about. Thanks for listening. Got any questions?
Right.
No idea how I've done for time.
Yeah, you know what? Perfect for time. We've got like 6 minutes left before the break, so yeah, a good amount of time to get some questions in. Mark has asked, what's the recommended rifle for shooting Canada geese? I mean, can you comment on that? Is that something you could give advice on?
So I'm not a qualified firearms instructor, so that's my first thing.
But you would say firearms rather than anything out. It needs to be a powerful.
I would say, yeah, they're a big bird, so I wouldn't want to be looking at an air rifle. It's one of those things, it's very conflicting when you look at the licenses, because they will say you can use an air rifle, you can use a rimfire, you can use, one of them says a semi-automatic. Please don't be running around the countryside with a semi-automatic. But yeah, basically I would say anything above an air rifle, probably I'd be looking at a 2.2. I don't think a 177 would be big enough. They are a big bird.
And like you said, a lot of the time, you mentioned these, different rifles or power, but at the end of the day, it's about being humane, isn't it? And actually the bird being dispatched quickly.
You don't want the thing, running around with a flesh wound, because I guess if you try and help it, it's not going to let you.
Probably not. No, not advised. Paul has asked, so does the Avix laser work with other bird species, i.e. wood pigeons?
Wood pigeons, yes. So any of the flocking birds, the thing you've got to be careful with, and I saw somebody also popped up what training is needed. So first of all, I'll cover all of that. Training, there is a basic laser safety course, which you do online, and it's free. Okay, we will not sell you any kind of laser product until you've done that. What I always say is, if you've got 5 people that want to do that training to buy 1 laser, that is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
If you've got 1 trained person buying 5 lasers, what are you doing with them, you know? With wood pigeons, generally it's what you've got to consider is, in your training, it will show you, you're always going to be pointing the laser down. Okay, as soon as you point it up, it starts going off into the air and potentially taking planes out of the sky. So it's always going to be pointing down. So if it's wood pigeons in a field, yeah, absolutely, it will move them on. But if you're trying to move them out of a tree, well, you need to be above the tree. Okay.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that. But yeah, the laser is extremely effective on many birds, but flocking birds work best. So starlings, I mean, seeing them come out of a milking shed, you can literally sweep it around the edge of a milking shed at the end of the day, and you'll suddenly see 40 starlings go off, or
Wow.
more, depending on the colony. Pigeons, yeah, move it around. The key is kind of learning how to move it. Some people just sort of wave it around as if it's at a disco. No, the birds just get their vibe on. And they point it straight at the bird. Means nothing. They've not watched Willis films. They do not go sniper. They need to see this threat moving towards them, and then they'll react and take off.
Yeah, fabulous. Yeah, with the training side of things that someone else has put on there, regarding Canada geese, it's an invasive species, but once captured, if you capture it, are you allowed to re-release them?
I would say no. I would say no. To be honest, I couldn't check. I wouldn't check on the legislation. I'd be asking, what have you done to catch it in the first place? Obviously, if you've caught it, you've caught it for a reason. So what was your intention with catching it?
Yeah, it'd be the Wildlife and Countryside Act, wouldn't it? It would be mentioned if you weren't allowed to, like, grey squirrels, for example, you can't re-release. So I haven't seen it in there. But it's like, so it's like, where would you release it anyway? It's a bit like people talk about capturing, rats alive and then releasing them somewhere else. I'm like, well, whose poor land would you release them on? But also that creature has established its, breeding ground, its feeding ground, and you're just abandoning it somewhere it has no clue where it's going. So
I would say, without checking the Wildlife and Countryside Act, and the last time I printed it off, it was 350 pages. You
printed it off?
Yeah, I'm old school. I like a paper copy. I can get with my highlighter pens in. So I would say, certainly, if it's not a legal requirement, if you've caught it for a reason. So I would say, if you've caught it for that reason, dispatch it humanely. Don't try and release it elsewhere. Why would you do that? If you've caught it for a reason, and you're better off putting it out.
Great. I mean, it's unusual pest, the title, and certainly we might not consider Canada geese necessarily unusual, but it definitely is, and it's an unusual pest for us to deal with. I have never dealt with Canada geese ever, and that's why Birdwise, like you mentioned before, and people like yourself, working with the association, when we get those, members that are struggling with those things, we've got somewhere to go. So I really appreciate you being on Birdwise with me.
It's one of those things. Whenever an animal is interacting with us in a way we'd rather it didn't, then it becomes a pest. But it's knowing what you can and can't do. And as I say, Canada geese, some people, it's lovely, and to be honest, if I was at a park and there were some geese on the lake, I go, it's lovely. Then when they start chasing me, not so lovely.
That's it. So, not so lovely, or walking through their poop, as you say, and slipping all over the place. But great. Well, fabulous. That's perfectly on time again. Another 30 seconds before we're going to go on our break. So I appreciate that, Elaine. That was amazing, as always. And if anyone else has got any other questions, they can get in touch with you direct. I would assume.
Elaine at PestFix.co.com. Never remember my email address.
Okay. Indeed. Thank you. Well, I will wave goodbye, and we'll be going off a little break in a minute. So go and grab yourself another pop. All right. Thanks, Elaine.
Already there.
There you go. Great. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Great. So everybody, thank you for just these first couple of sessions that we've had, Richard and Elaine. Great. Got some good questions in there. And we've just come to a little break perfectly on time, 10:55. We're going to go for 10 minutes. So go and grab a bit of a comfort break, have a coffee, tea, pop, whatever floats your boat, and we'll see you back here in 10 minutes.